Wakanda Forever, which is the sequel to the highly successful Black Panther film, Ryan Coogler returning to the director's chair, and most if not all people from the previous film have set to return. In the years since the blip, Wakanda is reeling from the tragedy of the loss of their king T'Challa, Black Panther, while also trying to figure out a new path forward in the wake of this tragedy. Shuri, the sister of Black Panther, buries herself in her work while also facing a new threat in the form of Namor, known as the Submariner from the Marvel Comics, and along the way is able to finally find a way to properly grieve the death of her brother. Considering the success of the first film, a lot of people were anticipating what this movie could possibly do, especially in the wake of Chadwick Boseman's passing. In light of that, I try not to talk too much about this, but in the case of this was kind of hard to swallow. When it came out that Chadwick Boseman passed away from colon cancer 2 years ago, that was completely out of left field for me, and I thought at first that it was a joke or a hoax, but then more news reports started coming out confirming it. So in the wake of that, this movie had a really hard task to accomplish. Some people debated about whether or not they should recast him with a variant from another alternate dimension since we are in the multiverse saga. Some didn't want that to happen at all and that Shuri should have been the Black Panther, which it's not really a spoiler, I guess, if you've seen the trailers. She does eventually become the Black Panther, and I don't think it's really a surprise if you know the comics or at least have somewhat of a casual knowledge of it, at least. I don't really have a strong preference, but I think in the case of this, considering how iconic Chadwick Boseman's portrayal was, maybe it wasn't really the smartest idea to recast him, and I think this movie did the best job that it could in order to explain why T'Challa isn't in this universe anymore. And I think how they handled his death, very, very classy. And I don't think they really could have done it any other way. From the moment the film opens with the Marvel logo, the one as you've seen it open as of late with all the famous scenes and images from the MCU, this one shows all the images of T'Challa, or Black Panther, from all the movies that he's been in the MCU, with a purple color around it instead of the red, and no music. From the moment that happened, I thought, that's kind of cool. I like that. Given that Shuri is the sister of Black Panther, I think naturally she would be next in line to take the Black Panther throne, and also she is a member of the younger generation of the royal family, so why not? She was also a cool side character for T'Challa. His tech support like Chloe O'Brien is for Jack Bauer in 24. And my favorite moment to this day is when she gets him on camera punching the suit and it knocks him back and she laughs and he goes, "Delete that footage." That's definitely something my sister would do to me. What are little sisters for? I didn't watch too many trailers for this movie. I'd seen maybe one or two. Might have seen a couple spots here and there, but I went into this movie mostly blind. And I've been doing with that with movies as of late because I feel like it kind of makes the experience a little bit better for me. Not that I mind seeing multiple trailers for a movie that I'm really excited or looking forward to, but I think maybe in some ways it actually kind of helps that you don't see too much. Just a personal preference of mine. I'm not saying everybody else has to be this way. I didn't really have high expectations for this movie either, considering the response that the MCU Phase 4 has received over the last 2 years. But I really liked the first Black Panther, and I don't know if I absolutely adored it like a lot of people did, but I can easily see why people did. And the fact that it got nominated for so many Oscars at the time, including Best Picture, this film had a lot to live up to, and unfortunately with the death of Chadwick, that just didn't really help. But this is a very worthy sequel that has a lot of emotion involved, particularly from Angela Bassett's character, as well as the villainous character, Namor. One of the biggest strengths that the first Black Panther has, and it continues in here, is the world building. Everything feels so lived in, and so realistic, yet so out there and weird and zany, which Marvel continues to do by embracing the weirdness. But somehow the MCU manages to make it feel somewhat grounded and tangible, just like with the Star Wars universe or the Harry Potter universe. From the costume design, the production design, the musical choices by Ludwig Göransson, who I think is someone that you should definitely pay attention to, Hollywood, if you're looking for somebody new to inject some actual exciting music into future projects like film or television. You could say that in a lot of ways he's like the new Hans Zimmer, so to speak. And the political themes are carried over from the first film as well, although with Wakanda now being exposed to the world with their source of vibranium, naturally a lot of other countries are going to wonder why are they doing this or that, and the Queen basically calls them out saying, hey, we have a bunch of people trying to steal our vibranium and you're not doing anything about it, and yet you're asking us to do something about it? And for some people to say that this movie is woke for that reason, well, that's kind of the whole purpose. It's supposed to show politics, and I think that's basically the core of the Black Panther comics. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is not the first time that Marvel has made social or political commentary in their stories, and it's certainly not going to be the last time either. So let's not pretend that this is new ground that we're treading in. Probably should have given a heads up earlier. I'm not going to go into everything about this movie, but I will go into some details about the plot. Not full in depth, but the mid-credit scene especially, there's a pretty big reveal on a certain character, so I'll let you know ahead of time when we get there. The character journey that Shuri experiences is very different from her brother, yet in a lot of ways it parallels what he experiences, although it's almost the opposite. Like when she finally takes the herb in order to embrace the Black Panther throne, she expects to see her mother, but sees somebody else entirely. And given that she doesn't really believe in the ancestral plane like her brother and her father did, she goes down a similar path of her desire for vengeance when she loses somebody close to her, just like T'Challa wanted to do to Bucky when his father died. And she comes to make the choice of not wanting to kill Namor, and she says a very similar thing that her brother says when he captures Zemo. She says to him, "Vengeance is consuming both of us." And I like the design of the Black Panther suit too. I didn't know for sure how it was gonna look, and I'm just so used to the way Chadwick Boseman looked in the costume, but I think that Letitia Wright, when she doesn't have the mask on but the suit on, she looks like a total badass. And she actually is when she starts going down in the fight scene. And she gets to show that when she goes up against Namor's henchmen in the fight scenes. Lupita Nyong'o returns as Nakia, and she's in a very different place in the post-blip world. She's the headmistress of this school in Haiti. She's been afraid to deal with the loss of her former lover, T'Challa, and she comes to the Queen's aid when she gets captured by Namor. And she is a very crucial part in the movie for what Shuri has to experience in order to come to her realization and her need to accept the fact that she has to grieve the loss of her brother, because she's basically burying herself in all the technology creation that she usually does, because she doesn't want to acknowledge any pain that she's feeling deep underneath. And naturally, that's how people tend to grieve. A lot of the time, at least. They tend to bury themselves into something else, like what they know, like work, or self-medication, which obviously in a lot of ways is not healthy when it comes to drugs and drinking especially. But inevitably, people are going to find some coping mechanism in order to not think about the loss that they've experienced. And I think that's a very realistic approach that Marvel takes with this one. And none of the acting feels out of place either. I think Ryan Coogler manages to have a really good grasp on how to let these actors actually breathe and feel their emotions. And there's a lot of talking scenes in this movie too. And the previous film had the right balance of it, for myself at least. But the biggest weakness that I would say that this movie has is its second act. When we get to see the underwater city that Namor is living in, and we get to see how he feels about this place and what his backstory is and where he came from, it's all important information that gets us inside this character's head, but after a while I felt like it was stretched out way too long, and it could have been cut down, I think, at least by 10 minutes, maybe 15. When it comes to the actor, I hope I'm saying this right, Tenoch Huerta, he is good in the movie, and it's nice to see someone who's more of an anti-hero rather than the traditional villain, but I don't think his motivations are as captivating as Killmonger's was in the previous one. And I'm not trying to compare too much to this film and its predecessor, because I don't really think that's fair, but man, was I missing Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger. Although, no spoilers, never mind. Although that was probably a dead giveaway. And like with many Marvel characters, the first time I ever heard the mention of the Submariner was in a Spider-Man property.
Who could have wanted to steal Octavius' technology?
Ooh, we know!
Who?
The Submariner.
Submariner? Get serious, will you?
Spider-Man was, and still does for me, continues to introduce me to so many other things in the Marvel Universe, so it had to come from something, I suppose. I also think the action is a big improvement in this one too. Not to say that the action in the first film was bad. In particular, the car chase in the first one, which felt like a James Bond movie, but in the right ways. The final climactic fight, though, between Black Panther and Killmonger looked very artificial. Almost like from a PS3 or PS4 video game, and I think it needed a huge cleanup in post-production. This film doesn't have that problem, thankfully. And it seems like Ryan Coogler took a lot of notes from the criticisms that some people threw at him with that climactic fight in the first film. Not really sure about that, and I don't want to speak for the guy, but maybe he looked back on that and said, that could have been better. And in regards to the addition of Allegra de Fontaine, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, she doesn't really add a whole lot to the movie. If she was only in there for one scene, it would have been fine, but there's a couple more scenes with her involving Martin Freeman's character, who I guess turns out to be her ex-husband, but it doesn't really go anywhere, and I don't really think she needed to be in here, at least not for that much. Again, if it was one scene or one moment, it would have been fine. I still like the fact that Julia Louis-Dreyfus is in this universe, and again, Marvel, please bring in Jerry Seinfeld, Jason Alexander, and Michael Richards. Everybody would explode. Well, anybody who's a Seinfeld fan, myself included. The standouts for me in the character and acting department are Dominique Thorne and Angela Bassett. Riri Williams, who is supposed to be the new Ironheart that's coming up soon, or the replacement for Iron Man. She's the comic relief of the movie, for sure, but she adds a lot of needed humor to the movie, and I didn't find it obnoxious in the slightest. The pop culture references she makes with Star Wars and Indiana Jones had me dead. They find her at MIT up in Boston, where she's going to school. Tony Stark went to MIT for his college education, and Peter Parker wanted to go there too, so anyone who wants to be the next Iron Man, just go to MIT. Simple as that. As for Angela Bassett, who's the Queen of Wakanda in this one, she has a lot of emotional weight that's riding on her, with the loss of her son, and worrying about what her daughter's going to do going forward, and how she's trying to get her to process what she's been grieving. And without being too specific, the way they handle her character in this one, it got me. And I kind of saw it coming after a while, but still, I was really surprised that they went in that direction. And it was a very, very bold move on Marvel's part that they actually went in that direction that they did with her. In my estimation, at least it was. Oh yeah, and what they do with Okoye, I think she's a great side character, and how they use her here, you couldn't have done it better in my book. As for the mid-credit scene, big spoiler warning, so if you don't want to know what I'm about to say, just skip ahead to this time and we'll go from there. But as Shuri is sitting on the beach, processing all of the emotions she's been holding in, Nakia shows up with a young boy, and it turns out this young boy is the son of T'Challa. And the reason why she didn't bring him to the funeral is because they didn't think that Wakanda and the family were ready to experience this news. And it was something that was set up by the Queen when she was about to tell her daughter that, you know, there's something about your brother that you don't know about yet. But then the Submariner came in, and that plot seemed to have been forgotten about, and I thought, really? That's all they're gonna do? They're not even gonna mention it? But it's revealed in the mid-credit scene that Shuri's mother knew about the boy. That's when I went, oh, that's what it was. It's pretty clear what it is if you're paying attention to the details. But another thing about that scene is that it doesn't necessarily set up another movie, because usually mid and post-credit scenes tend to do that in the MCU. I'm sure there's going to be another Black Panther at some point, and Shuri is going to appear in a new Avengers team-up somewhere down the line, possibly in Kang Dynasty or Secret Wars or whatever Marvel's going to have her show up. But I like that this movie doesn't necessarily lead to, this is the next movie that's coming in. Not that I'm against that or anything, but it's actually kind of refreshing in a lot of ways. And as I've said before, how you do it in execution is what I think is the most important. And in this case, I think they actually got it right. Wakanda Forever doesn't necessarily quite reach the level of its predecessor, but I think it's a very, very worthy sequel that hits all the right beats of emotion that's required. And it's a very respectful tribute to Chadwick Boseman and his legacy, as well as the character of Black Panther. The only thing we really see of him is archive footage from the previous movies that he was in. They don't show any new footage or footage that they might have filmed with Chadwick Boseman, although I was kind of wondering if they were going to do that. Maybe they thought it was too soon or too early, or that it wouldn't have felt right. Either way, it was going to be a tough challenge regardless in the wake of his death. And I think that Ryan Coogler and company found the right way to do it. So those are my thoughts on Wakanda Forever. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for more reviews that I got coming up soon. And I got a couple of videos in mind that I've wanted to do for a while. Something in regards to military films, since this month it's Veterans Day. I thought about maybe reacting to certain scenes from military-themed or war-themed movies, and maybe give my own thoughts and insights on how I think certain characters are acting and whether or not that's fictional or realistic. If you guys are interested in that, just let me know down below. So thanks again guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.